Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the American Federation of Teachers and Share My Lesson, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Integrate Technology into Your Classroom with Google's Applied Digital Skills. My name is Tamika Childs, and I am an AFT e-learning coordinator, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter, Shala Naimi, with Google Applied Digital Skills. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for that wonderful introduction and for joining us. I know we have people from all different time zones, so for those who are, like me, approaching the evening, just wanted to say a special thank you for joining. It's really my pleasure today to share a little bit of one of our free programs with you called Applied Digital Skills, and I'm very
Make
excited.
sure that your mic is unmuted.
Oh, can you hear me better now?
Hello?
Great. So as I was mentioning, thank you all for having me. I'm really excited to share one of our programs, Applied Digital Skills, with all of you here today. Applied Digital Skills is one of our free programs, very focused on digital skills and digital literacy and computational thinking. So just a huge thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon or evening, depending on where you're located, and for AFT for hosting this wonderful webinar. So I just wanted to start with a quick introduction to Applied Digital Skills, and thought no one can do it better than one of our own videos. And so I'm just going to go ahead and share that video as a starting point.
The role of schools has changed drastically because of the use of technology. It's no longer sufficient to be just a textbook and paper classroom.
Applied Digital Skills is like a website that you go on and it'll give you a task and work you through it using videos.
At the end of the video, it's going to have like a list. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. So you're going to do it yourself.
Employers are looking for students that have the collaboration skills that a lot of them are not coming out of high school with. This program feeds right into that need.
I thought you were like typing like Nokia.
Very seldom do you have a project that engages all of your students all the time. And the Applied Digital Skills seems to do that.
We do mostly fun activities, like I say, dream vacation, Paris, the city of love. I really want to go there.
The video material gives me more freedom to interact one-on-one with my kids. To have that kind of relationship with them is what makes my classroom one of their favorite classes.
We can be ourselves and have fun, you know?
Just like
It's teaching so many of the skills that our kids need once they leave high school or even start jobs in high school. From the critical thinking to the collaboration to organization skills, all those things are wrapped into this program. And to be able to utilize that across the board at all schools, I think would be invaluable.
Wonderful. I love that video so much, partially because it really emphasizes that digital skills and digital tools are things that are really fully integrated into our lives today, very focused on understanding not only how to use digital skills in a vacuum, but how to do something fun, like plan a trip to Paris. So we're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so really digging into one of our free resources related to digital tools. But before doing that, I wanted to go ahead and just get a lay of a little bit of the room in terms of who's on the call today and what your experience with digital tools or technology in your classroom is right now. So we have a poll question here. The question is, I use digital tools or technology in my classroom with the options of never, once a semester, once every few weeks, or every day. So I'm just going to stop and give you guys a second to reply to that, just 10 or 15 seconds to share how often you use digital skills in your classroom. All right. Hopefully everybody has had a chance to reply to this poll, and let's see what the results are. All right. So we have most members on this call are using digital tools or technology in their classroom every single day. That's impressive. That's amazing. And a good percentage, 26.7%, once every few weeks. So I think there are so many different digital tools out there, and we're really going to dig into just one of them today. And so what I really want to emphasize in this entire webinar is that, technology and other types of digital tools are really just that. They're tools that can be used for your own classroom purposes and your own pedagogy. We often here at Google, in terms of our own education work, like to think about and like to talk about technology being sort of a means and not an end in itself. And so really thinking about what technology is important for your classroom and your students' learning objectives. So I'm really excited to just be able to share one of those different tools with you, and then hopefully as you start to use other technology or more technology, you're able to find additional ones that are of use to you and your students. So what we'll be talking about today is actually a program that focuses on things like planning a dream vacation, as you saw in the video, while learning spreadsheet formulas, or producing a blockbuster movie while learning document formatting and graphic design, or editing a piece of writing or a research paper, and in that process using student-written programming code. And all of this is really focused on kind of bridging a perceived gap between digital skills and actual projects, bringing together things like critical thinking and creativity with the actual digital tools that can be used and leveraged in those spaces. And so for the next 40 minutes or so, what I wanted to share is sort of a series of different things. One is why we're all here today, why we're talking, what Applied Digital Skills actually is, and then to kind of jump into the curriculum a little bit to get a little bit of a sample of what it looks like and the different types of lessons you can find on the curriculum, keeping in mind that what I'm going to share here today is really a small sample of what's available and online and what we're continuing to build. And then finally, end with a little bit of a guide on how to get started with the curriculum if that's something that's of interest to you, and finishing the rest of the webinar with hopefully the many questions that you have as well. I am also very much in the spirit of asking a lot of questions, so I really do encourage you to as mentioned, spend time in that Q&A section, share your questions with us, and our wonderful team at AFT will be curating and sharing those with me as we move throughout this presentation. So jumping right into it, why are we all here? Why do we want to learn about integrating technology in classrooms? The answer here, I think, for many of the people using the curricula or using technology every day is probably something they already know. But, when I'm going to answer why we're here, I'll really answer it from the perspective of Google. It's very fundamental to the way we think as a company, and our company mission is to make information accessible, really universally accessible, and that includes in the classroom. We really believe that every single student in every single school deserves to have access to the tools and to the skills that will set them up for success in the job market. That could be today's job market. It could also be tomorrow's job market, really making sure that we're doing as a company everything we can to support those students and their individual growth. We also see from our own sort of research and looking at the landscape that the job market is changing, and it's changing really quickly, and that employers overall are looking for skills that a lot of students aren't fully confident in yet. This is sort of a dilemma that we see fairly regularly out in the space, which is a student is graduating from high school or college, and they don't feel like they have the skills ready for a job. We see that only 44% of 18 to 25-year-olds believe their education is giving them what they need to enter the workforce. And similarly, we see quite a bit of a gap in terms of what employers are saying they need and the types of applicants that they're getting. And so, this is only going to sort of increase in the coming years. And a lot of what we're trying to do, excuse me, as a free curriculum is help provide resources that can be leveraged to close that gap, or at least to address part of that gap. And a lot of that relies around technology skills and sort of critical thinking skills and the demonstration of that through tech tools. What we do know is that about half of today's job openings in the United States require a high school degree, but not a 4-year college degree. We also see a massive growth rate of digital-based and middle-skilled jobs compared to other types of jobs. And we know that jobs that are going to exist, 4, 5, 6 years from now will really require what is often termed as an engineering mindset, but really is another way of just saying a problem-solving mindset. And so what we have developed in response to this sort of growing gap and this growing need is specifically applied digital skills. So what applied digital skills is very simply a free video-based online curriculum. And what it is designed to do is to help prepare students of most ages, I should say, really upper elementary and above, for the growing number of jobs that require basic digital skills. And so that's to say that a student going through and leveraging applied digital skills is not going to come out with, a specific set of skills for a very advanced or specific job, such as, let's say, IT or computer science to directly become an engineer. What the skills that they will get are really around basic digital skills and the demonstration of those. And so kind of digging into a little bit about, what in the world is applied digital skills, I often like to share a little bit of the story of why we even created applied digital skills to begin with. Why is Google creating a program, a curriculum called Applied Digital Skills? And the history of that is really one more than anything else of sort of user demand. Several years ago, we had a group of teaching fellows, teachers who we brought to our South Carolina office, who were really sanctioned to help solve some challenges we saw in computer science education specifically. They were tasked to go out and to work with other teachers and to develop for Google a computer science curriculum that would hopefully help share some computational thinking skills and other types of skills for elementary and middle school students. And from that came a program called Computer Science, or CS First. That program is about 5 or 6 years old now, and it has over 1 million users. And one of the pieces of feedback that was sort of received to that program team specifically was that, this is great, but not everybody wants to be a computer scientist. And 2, this is great, but, do you have anything for older students? Do you have things for students who are in middle school and high school, maybe even in college or upper elementary, and who are really looking more, not necessarily to get to know computer science, but are looking for like basic digital skills? I think we often work around this assumption that because so many, young people are on their phones so often, well, they must know how to make a budget on their phones too. What we found, and what many of you already know, is that that's not the case. Creating a budget or, developing workplace skills is very different than other types of, mobile technology skills. And so that's really where applied digital skills sort of came from as a starting point and why it was designed the way it is designed. And that way is actually specifically project-based. So as I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, applied digital skills is very focused on bridging the gap between what we might call hard digital skills like coding or using spreadsheets or data visualization, graphic design, internet search, etc., with practical life skills like collaboration, creativity, budgeting, making decisions as a group and sort of collaborating together in groups and teams, creating presentations, making a very cohesive resume that kind of communicates effectively. What Applied Digital Skills does is use a series of videos to help students practice life skills and use digital tools in that process. And so to give you an example, what a student might do is use a spreadsheet to create a budget or demonstrate creativity through a graphic design project, something that really bridges the gap between these two different categories. And in that entire process, kind of helps students learn how to use things like Google Apps scripts or slides, how to use email, spreadsheets, documents, websites, etc. That is, at a very high level, kind of the way Applied Digital Skills is designed. As I mentioned, it's a video-based curriculum that takes these sort of big overarching subjects like creating a resume and then breaks it down step by step into smaller videos to help students really grow skills one step at a time. The curriculum also, actually, I've written here that has over 120 hours of content. It's actually over 200 hours of content now, and that content is as short as 45-minute lessons and as long as 9-hour lessons. So it really is focused on enabling you as the teacher to decide what piece of content, what lesson is right for your students, and for the schedule that you have, the available time that you have. It's also aligned with state standards across all 50 states, and as I mentioned, it's really been designed for teachers and by teachers. It's been now reviewed by both the International Society for Technology and Education and received a seal of alignment in proficiency. And it also received sort of a common sense top pick of learning for 2018. So we're really proud of really some of our industry partners and others in the field kind of looking at our curriculum independently and seeing the value in it as well. It's also already in use by, actually that number has gone up as well. It's in use by about just 500,000 students right now in the United States, which I will be honest and say as part of the program team that's developed this curriculum, always is such a delightful shock for us to see so many different students using it and finding value in it. Awesome. And so I wanted to also dig in a little bit to why the curriculum has been designed in this sense. Every single lesson is very focused on teaching students how to think and how to work. So every lesson has the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking in mind. It is very focused on helping students work both independently but also together in small groups and with their larger communities to help demonstrate these different really key elements that are necessary both just in life but also specifically the job market to demonstrate them with digital tools. And so really, it's sort of, we approach every single lesson with this question of how is a student going to demonstrate creativity in this process, or how will they collaborate in this process? And with that in mind, that really kind of guides the way that we develop these lessons. The curriculum is also free. It's completely free and available online, so you can go ahead to the Applied Digital Skills website and use it today and use it tomorrow or any day you want to. It's also flexible. As I mentioned earlier, we have over 200 hours of lessons, but they're very, very modular. And so we've seen instances in which a teacher might use the curriculum for an entire year or an entire semester. So day in and day out, they're using a new lesson or they're using a new part of a lesson. We've also seen teachers who, they there was just that one lesson that was something of interest to them and that worked for their students, and that's the only one they wanted to use. And that's the only one they did use. And so it really is modular, and you can use it as you see fit and really kind of use it more than anything else as a resource for your classroom. We also wanted to make sure that, we didn't solely kind of publish these lessons and left them at that. We wanted to make sure that in this process, we were also being good and thoughtful partners to all of you, to the educators in the room who are really the ones who teach this content. And the way we did that was partially by having a fairly robust support system via email, but then also to develop customizable lesson plans and rubrics for every single lesson. And so what you see on the screen here is a lesson called Plan an Event. And this is specifically the lesson plan, which goes over kind of the key words that are used, the full duration of the lesson, the different components of the lesson, and most importantly, the learning objectives and outcomes of a lesson. And these are Google documents that, excuse me, that you can make a copy of, and you can customize it, you can change it, shorten it, add to it, anything you want, anything that's useful to you and your students. Similarly, we have rubrics for every single lesson that are also customizable. And, lastly, what was really important to us is to make sure that our content itself was really focused on being as accessible to students and as easy to digest for students as possible. And so what we explored a lot of different ways of developing content, and we ultimately settled on video-based learning. As you can imagine, it takes quite a lot of resource to record, design, record, edit original videos for each one of these lessons. But we thought this was a really important thing for us to do because it gave a visual to students in a way that was very effective. And so a student who is going through and learning some of this content is not only reading about it, but they're also seeing it and they're also hearing it. They also have the ability to slow it down, to speed it up, to read a transcript alongside it. So really focused on making it as adaptable to each student pace as possible. We know that every student works at different paces, and some will have an easier time with certain parts of a lesson or on particular lessons than others. And so what we really wanted to do was to give both students and teachers the flexibility and freedom to kind of work at their own pace, with an eye towards also ensuring that you as the teacher had, a very high level view as to where the student was in a particular lesson. So now that I have given you a little bit of just an overview of what Applied Digital Skills is and how it's set up, I wanted to get a little bit more tangible and just give you some examples of the content that you might find on the Applied Digital Skills website. So as I mentioned earlier, if you go to the Applied Digital Skills website, which is g.co/applieddigitalskills/SML, you'll find a curriculum page that is constantly growing, aligned to state standards. I mean, we have, I think, 40 or more lessons on there today, and just adding, on a weekly basis, almost new lessons. So really what I'm going to share with you is kind of a snippet above all else, just to give you a sense of a little bit of the diversity of lessons that you might find on the site. The first one I wanted to share is a lesson that if it's done in full, some teachers prefer to do just a part of it, but if you do all of it, it takes 2 to 3 hours. And it's called If Then Adventure Stories. It's really kind of a take on the Choose Your Own Adventure story. And so what students do in this particular lesson is they watch a series of videos that walk them through collaborating through comments and in small groups in docs, and creating hyperlinks and Google Slides that tell stories. And so what I really, really love about this lesson is, above all else, kind of the creativity and open-endedness of this. Students are, they come out with these really tangible skills. They learn how to collaborate, practice collaborating. They learn how to make comments in docs. They learn how to use slides and to make hyperlinks that are dependent on previous slides. It's really sort of a set of extremely tangible digital skills. But in the process, we don't dictate the story that they tell. And so that story can be anything. And we've seen stories in elementary school about washing your hands so you don't get sick, to stories in 11th grade history classrooms where students are reimagining historical events. So students are wondering, what if Napoleon did win the Battle of Waterloo, or, what if an election went in a different direction? What might the world look like today? And so, the ability to create either a simple or a really complex story here and to sort of demonstrate really critical thinking skills and also subject matter skills, I think is what makes this lesson so particularly special and really one of our most popular lessons as a starting point. The other one I wanted to share is called Plan an Event. And this is a lesson that can take up to 9 hours because it is extremely comprehensive. It essentially has students pick an event, then plan that event through a collaborative work. And so they plan the date, the time, the sort of key features of the event. They then plan to sort of organize and work together to create basically a to-do list and a schedule of what happens at the event. So they learn how to make conditional formulas in Google Sheets, and they eventually create both a flyer and a website for the event. And so what they're learning to do is kind of use a whole huge range of digital tools, from websites to design documents to sheets and docs, to plan an event from start to finish. And we see this as kind of a very popular lesson for unsurprisingly, actual events. So, for a school fundraiser or a prom event, we see students in small groups in a homeroom class or in a different class trying to take on this particular lesson, which is really quite exciting. The other one I wanted to share is a lesson that can be done in as little as 45 minutes. It is a lesson that guides students through organizing information about college in Google Sheets. And so in this particular lesson, in the 45 minutes, students create and they set up a spreadsheet. They think about and sort of do research on the different parts of a college experience that are important to them. So that might be something along the lines of tuition, or the distance from home, or the accessibility or availability of a particular major that that student is interested in. And then they organize all of that information in Google Sheets so that they can really kind of practice some of those data analysis and critical thinking skills in the process. So a really good way to kind of just get students a little bit comfortable with, how do you make decisions and how do you leverage these technology tools to make some of those decisions. We also have a really popular and fun unit that's also 45 minutes called Create a Presentation, all about a topic. And again, we as Google do not dictate what that topic is. The topic can be anything. It could be about my dog, or it could be about about the scientific method or a historical event. But really what the specific lesson goes through is, how do you present effectively? How do you format a presentation, share your research, design a slide so that you can, in fact, create a presentation about anything? And one of the last ones I'm going to share is creating a resume in Google Docs, also a lesson that can be started in as little as and finished in as little as 45 minutes. Really popular in high school classes in particular. And what it really guides students through is, how do you start with a resume template and really just kind of fill it out. How do you develop, edit, update your resume? how do you format it effectively, and learn some, key communication skills so that you're able to, make sure that your first resume is a great resume and a great starting point, and you're using all the free resources you can to leverage effectively for that resume. And the last one I wanted to share is called Organize Files in Drive. This is also a 45-minute lesson, and it's actually, I guess, the only lesson we have right now that is not project-based, and so a student is not necessarily coming out with, a full event or a spreadsheet with information about colleges or their resume. What students learn how to do in these 45 minutes is organize files in Drive. And so, for all of you teachers out there, I think you, I'm sure, have your individual systems for how you organize files, and there are always so many different files and versions of those files, and it's really, I would say for myself, it's sometimes really challenging to understand, like, how do I organize all of this information effectively? And it's very easy for it to get overwhelming. And so, the same applies for students, and as they start to use technology tools and start to sort of engage in the cloud more, since we're past the days, unfortunately, sometimes I think, of floppy disks and almost USB drives, it really goes through teaching students how you effectively organize different files in different folders. So I wanted to share a couple of, case studies and other types of information that might help you get started with the curriculum. We have just about 20 minutes left, so I'll make sure that we have, hopefully about 10 minutes or so at least for questions. But I first wanted to share a couple of resources. So as I mentioned, we have, over 500,000 students, everyone from 5th and 4th graders to 12th graders, and many times also adult learners who are making their first resume or re-entering the workforce and learning some new digital skills themselves. And what I pulled out here were a couple of examples of how 2 different educators are using the curriculum. The first one is actually a library media specialist, Mary George. She runs a class that teaches tech skills and information literacy for students at her middle school. And so they use a number of applied digital skills lessons, including some of our research lessons, which are focused on exploring the role that technology has in the workplace, the relationship between technology ethics and security, as well as equal access to technology. So some of her students, she shared some of her students' projects with us recently, and there are things, even like how do you explore self-driving cars? What are the ethical concerns or the security concerns or the other sort of societal implications of self-driving cars? And so really great to sort of see how she is leveraging that within her research space. On our website, you will find a guide that Mary created and was kind enough to share and allow us to share with others, which is really her quick start guide for how do you use applied digital skills for librarians. And so she goes through the different steps that she has used, including gathering your group, choosing your lessons, creating the class, etc. And so really a very kind free resource that she has been nice enough to share with us, and that's available online to you. Another one is that we want to share is actually from Amanda, who's a 7th grade science teacher. She exclusively teaches applied digital skills in her 7th grade class, and so she's one of the teachers I mentioned earlier who actually uses the applied digital skills curriculum for the entire semester of, in her science class. And so she actually explores and uses a number of different lessons, including our lesson on planning and budgeting, if-then adventure stories, picking the next box office hit, which is a really fun lesson where students use existing public information about film trends and then basically use that information to make a prediction based on the data about the next box office hit. So really what's the next hit that we're going to see in the movie theater. So a really fun way to to integrate data analysis and pop culture in a lot of ways. So Mary has shared a number of her best practices and tips. And she's also been kind enough to share some of her sample student works as well. So ways that her students have used the curriculum and some of the outputs that they've had in that process, which we find is a really helpful resource, particularly when it comes to inspiring students and educators about how do you actually use applied digital skills and what are the different ways that the curriculum can be used. So as a final section, before we jump into the Q&A, and so, if you haven't already added a question there, please do, because I do want to make sure that we have enough time for that to be meaningful and we have enough questions as well. So what I really wanted to do as a next step is just to share with you how you can get started. If Applied Digital Skills is a resource that you want to bring into your classroom, or you've been kind of wondering to yourself, how do I integrate technology more in my classroom? And this might be a resource that you can start to leverage. It's very easy, thankfully, to get started. First, you just go to the Applied Digital Skills website, which is at g.co/applieddigitalskills, and you sign in or sign up. You do need a Google account to sign up. And if you don't already have one, you can very easily at that link, accounts.google, sign up for a free account. When you sign up for the first time, you'll be prompted with a question. And that question is, are you a student or are you a teacher? And the reason for that is that students and teachers are sort of paired together in virtual classrooms. And so it really starts with this one question of which one are you? And so in this case, I've kind of answered the question for all of us, which is I am a teacher. Let me just go back. It then asks you to set up your teacher profile, which includes information like your name and where you teach. Most of this information is optional, so you can kind of fill out what you'd like to fill out, and if there's anything you don't want to fill out, you don't have to fill that out. And then the last step is you create your first virtual class. So let's say that you want to create a class for your first period block business applications course or your third period English language arts course. You'll see a blue button there, and that blue button will enable you to make your first virtual course. And what happens when you make your first virtual course is you're given a code, and you give that code to your students who can then virtually join your class. So your students essentially go through the same process that I've actually just outlined here for all of you, but instead of indicating that they are a teacher, they will make a note that they are a student, and it'll be prompted to put in a code that you provide them. So in this case, the code is SIP22, and every teacher, every classroom will have a unique code there. Once your students join your class, or you've created the specific content, the specific classroom, you are ready to go. You will see a button called Curriculum. You can click that button and explore the many, many different lessons that are available to all of you. Pick which one you want and assign that to your students virtually. And so they'll receive a notification assignment that they have to research and develop a topic or create a new adventure story, and then they will sort of get started. We also have the feature to add specific lessons to specific classrooms, so students themselves don't have to go through and look at a lot of different content, but they're able to kind of hone in on some specific things that are of interest to them or that you've assigned to them. And what I don't have here, but I did want to share, is we also have an entire teacher dashboard that shows you the progress that your students have made throughout the specific lesson. So let's say that, I'm on section 5, but somebody else is on section 1. Really the purpose of that is for you to get a very quick and easy view of how your students are progressing and who might need a little bit of extra support, or who might be even going a little too fast, faster than you want them to go through the curriculum. So that is available in the dashboard, and the ability to sort of upload assignments or submit assignments is also in our dashboard as well. So that's, I skipped over this, but at the very end, students start to learn. They go through the different curriculum lessons, and they're able to go ahead and click on a lesson and get started. So that's really the bulk of what I wanted to share with all of you today. Again, the curriculum can be found at this website, ge.co/applied digital skills, or you can just go to google.com and search for applied digital skills. I've linked to a couple of resources here, but if you go to our website and you sign in or sign up, you'll find a lot more resources, including an entire help section, a get started guide, and a teacher kit, even recommended starter lessons, things that we think are easy ways to take that first step of using technology or using applied digital skills specifically in your classroom. And if you have any questions ever, I will take some of them right now. And then if you have any in the future, you can always reach us at applieddigitalskills@google.com, which goes directly to our curriculum team. And they'll be there to answer your questions, usually within a day. So that's really what I wanted to share. Thank you all so much for joining, and I'm really excited to take some of your questions now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for such a great presentation. I'd like to ask everyone who has questions to go now to the Q&A widget and type in your questions. Also, you should now be able to download your professional development certificate if you answered the poll questions in this webinar. It's best to do that now before you log out of the session. You must be on a laptop or desktop to access this certificate. Okay? So our first question is from Laura Hudson, and she wants to know, what applied digital skills lessons would you recommend an elementary school teacher to begin with? Leaning towards something maps related to connect with outdoor education program at my school, but what are your thoughts on entry-level lessons?
That is a great question, Laura. So what I would really recommend are probably a few different lessons. The first one is specifically, or I guess the first two are if-then adventure stories and create a presentation all about a topic. Both of these lessons are pretty short, and I have actually seen examples of them used on environmental issues in particular. And so I've seen examples of, students going through, elementary school students, I think fifth or sixth graders, going through and using that to talk about the importance of the environment and the importance of recycling. There was a student whose project I saw a while back, who I think was a fourth grade student. I'd have to double check, but definitely was in elementary school, who was actually using the if-then adventure stories to have a conversation about what happens if you don't recycle. Really what are the negative side effects of not recycling. So they went through, and I'm forgetting the names of those plastic things that you find often on soda bottles that connect the different soda bottle pieces together. And if you don't recycle that, it ends up in the ocean, and then it usually impacts a dolphin or a different sort of ocean animal in particular. And so that lesson I thought was a really good way to use it in a science classroom in particular. So I think those are really good and easy lessons to have with elementary school students. I also think that the plan an event lesson is a great way to talk about outdoor education and to plan an event around outdoor education. And the last lesson that I will recommend is actually called Guide to an Area. It's a few hours long, but you can actually take just a portion of it. If you look at the full lesson, you'll see that a portion of it is actually having students create their own maps to different areas. And so what they're able to do, for example, is take a map of Oklahoma City, and they're able to point, make different notes on the map and map out different, points of their maybe outdoor education program, different things places that they have visited or things that they have done. And so that lesson, I think, I would recommend it for, really 5th or 6th graders, probably not 3rd graders or even 4th graders, but I'd recommend you take a look at that little bit of the lesson and see if that might also be a good fit for your students, because I could definitely see a scenario where your elementary school students would find a lot of fun creating their own custom maps.
Awesome. So our next 2 questions come from Sindhu Kamal, and the questions are, can applied digital skills be accessed through Google Classroom, and are there lessons addressing ISTE standards?
Wonderful. So I'll sort of go backwards. So yes, all of the lessons actually are aligned with ISTE standards. So the entire curriculum has received the seal of alignment for proficiency against ISTE standards. And if you go on our website, you'll see in our help section a link that actually goes to the full ISTE report that kind of goes into quite a lot of detail about what specifically about the lessons align to the standards, but the entire curriculum on the whole does align to ISTE standards. And then your second question about can applied digital skills be accessed through Google Classroom, that's also a great question. So the curriculum, so applied digital skills itself is not fully embedded into Google Classroom, but what you can do is when you sign in to applied digital skills, you do have a kind of a shortcut link on the curriculum webpage where you can share to Google Classroom and sort of push lessons out through Google Classroom. But in terms of tracking progress, let's say through videos, that is not embedded into Google Classroom. So the short answer is it can be somewhat accessed through Google Classroom, but not fully embedded into it.
Awesome. Next question is from Catherine Criscuo, and she'd like to know, so this is an enhanced Google Classroom. It has lessons embedded. Are we able to edit any of the embedded lessons?
That is also a great question. So I'll sort of separate those 2 pieces out. One is the Google Classroom piece, which is, so the lessons, it's fairly similar. I mean, Google Classroom is a platform. It itself is not a curriculum. And so applied digital skills is very much a curriculum that you can use and leverage through Google Classroom, but you can also use completely separate from Google Classroom as well. And so it does have some similar features, but it's technically sort of a curriculum, whereas Google Classroom is a platform. And your other question about if you're able to edit any of the embedded or any of the lessons, yes, it's all customizable, and so through you can pick which lesson you want to start with, and then you can pick and choose which portions of it you want to do, or how you kind of want to specifically edit it, and that's sort of all something you can do on the specific lesson page if you've signed in and sort of have a classroom set up with your students.
Great. And our last question comes from Marianne Bland. She'd like to know, which lessons do you recommend for use with pre-service teacher educators?
That's a great question. Would you be able to specify to me what pre-service teacher educators might mean in this case?
Marianne, if you'd care to answer that in the group chat, if you're still here.
I could also make a little bit of an assumption and answer what I think it might be referring to. if that helps. But I just wanted to double check. Okay. So students studying to become teachers. Great, that's a fantastic question. So I wouldn't, there's not a particular lesson that I would recommend over another for pre-service teachers, teacher educators. I think probably more than anything, it's probably a good idea to just check out the website and click around. Maybe start with the If Then Adventure Stories lesson if you want sort of a full recommendation, but more than anything else, just kind of click around and see what spikes your interest, because I think the most important aspect of it is just to familiarize yourself with the format of the content, and then the specific lessons really depend on you and your future students and what grade level you're teaching or subject you're teaching. So that's not a full reply, so to speak, but hopefully that's a helpful start.
Thank you. And I know we said one last question, but I have to throw this last one in there because I think it's a great question to ask. And this one comes from Don Spiker. Is there a way to complete the lesson as a student to see what obstacles they might run into?
Yes, that is a fantastic question. There is a way to do that. There are actually multiple ways to do that. I'll go over the two main ways. The first one is if you have two email addresses, you can make two accounts, one as a teacher and one as a student who joins that teacher's classroom. And then you can kind of assign things to yourself and play around with it and see what issues you might run into. The second way is in that sign-up process, instead of indicating that you're a teacher, you just say you're a student who's learning independently without a teacher, and then you can go through and check it out and see what works and what doesn't work for you. And at the very end, you will see actually on a few different places, but also in our help section, or you can always reach out to us if you have any trouble. But you see, a very simple button that will enable you to change your account from a student to a teacher account if you're once you're ready to make that shift. And so those are the two main ways that you can do that. I will say that the videos, the lessons are all online and public, and so there's nothing that a student would see that is not already publicly available online. So you could also go directly to our curriculum page and take a look at the lessons there and see how the curriculum sort of progresses with time.
Very nice. Thank you for your presentation, Shala. It was wonderful. And thank you to our participants for joining us for this webinar.
Thank you, everyone.